Hey everyone, it's Carter King. If you're an educator, a leader, or just a parent who wants to teach kids about space, check out my newest book, Carter's Journey Through Space. It's available now on Amazon, Target, and bookstores everywhere. Come explore the universe with me.
Welcome to another episode of the Contagious Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle King, and the goal of this podcast is simple: to help you create environments where people thrive. Through real conversations, practical strategies, and powerful stories, we equip leaders, educators, and change makers just like yourself to build cultures rooted in purpose, performance, and authenticity. Because culture isn't something you talk about, it's something you live. This is the Contagious Culture Podcast. Let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of the Contagious Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle King, and the goal of this podcast is simple: to help you create ecosystems and environments where people thrive. Look, I have somebody on here today that is doing some phenomenal work. From a leadership landscape, from a nonprofit landscape, she is really a powerhouse in nonprofit leadership. Lauren is the executive director of Gratitude Network, where she supports social entrepreneurs in scaling their impact worldwide. She's led organizations from the ground up, like Suit Up, helping them grow exponentially while building sustainable systems. Lauren has been recognized as a White House champion for change, a Forbes Nonprofit Council contributor, and has been featured in multiple publications for her thought leadership. Lauren, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Happy Tuesday, and hope everyone's having a great day. Thanks for having me.
Oh, of course. You are a celebrity, Lauren. And I'm so grateful that we're able to have this conversation. You're doing some absolutely phenomenal work. One of the questions that I want us to start off with before we get into all of the different things that we're going to talk about in this episode is, what keeps your fire burning?
Yeah. I think the first thing that comes to mind for keeping my fire burning is, right, we always lead with our heart, but that doesn't mean it has to be hard work. And I think that's the thing that, right, when it really resonates me of like, what keeps me doing this work day in, day out. And the first is like, oh yeah, it's hard. And I was like, but I got to lead with my heart. And I feel like the dichotomy between the two is always something I really focus on is I have my heart, I have my head, and it's hard. And that's what keeps pushing through.
How would you describe what you do to people that don't know you, that this is their first time meeting you? Like, how would you describe that?
Absolutely. Well, it depends on where you are in the country. If you are a Silicon Valley, finance guru, I'd tell you we're the Y Combinator of nonprofits, right? For nonprofits. If you're in the middle of America, I say we help nonprofits be smarter, more efficient, and make your dollars go further. And if you're on the East Coast, the first question you ask me is, what do you do? Right. So I'm very used to that.
Oh, literally.
And especially being a former New Yorker, I'm perfectly fine with that. We're a nonprofit accelerator, right? We identify nonprofits who are doing incredibly good work, and we help them run like a business, because just because you're a nonprofit, it doesn't mean you shouldn't be running as a business. Because if your business is doing well, you get to serve more kids, you get to support more puppies, you get to make the world a better place. So it's in your best interest to really be running a really high performing nonprofit organization. And so we give you all the tools, the coaching, and the strategy to make that happen.
No, I love that, Lauren. And we do similar work, but on different sides of the playground. In your experience, what are nonprofits getting wrong? Where do I start?
They lead with their heart, right? And sometimes it's, nonprofit leaders always do the right thing. And that's not wrong. I will say that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean we can't use some of the same principles that, top Fortune 500 companies are using to build and scale our teams. Sometimes I feel like we're afraid to hurt feelings. We're afraid, that's how a for-profit thinks. We can't do things that way. And I think if anything, it's redefining and looking at your lens a little differently. And I mean, talk about building culture. Building culture, I feel like, is even more important in a nonprofit, because we're all not doing it for the paycheck, right?
Exactly.
And so you've got to really create that culture and create the systems and infrastructure for your nonprofit to scale and grow. And I think we talk a lot about what that looks like.
No, I love that. You talk about culture systems. You talk about these various tools that you need to be able
Yep,
to really accelerate forward. And I hear there's a lot of talk around this idea of scaling, scaling, scaling,
yep.
scaling, but you can't scale something that's not sustainable.
Nope.
Um, like at all. And I feel like we just like throwing around these words like scaling and impact and agile and all these things, but we really don't define what these words mean. Can you talk about what are actual systems that a nonprofit leader listening in right now can actually that they need or they need to clean up so that they can be able to jot these things down?
Yeah. We talk a lot about, right, especially actually for any company, right? If the leader were to leave tomorrow, can the organization, can the company continue?
That's
Right?
good.
Right? And if the answer is no, that is a system that, lives in the leader's brain. That is something that only happens if the leader is here. That's when
That's
you
good.
realize you're in trouble, right? The
Good.
leader should be able to walk out tomorrow and the impact you're having for profit or nonprofit should still be able to occur. So that's
Mm,
why I highly encourage all leadership teams to sit down and really look at, all right, your program or your service. What are all the steps to build the program, to measure the program? For operations, right? What is your tone of voice? What does your branding look like? What do you want people to think through? What does your marketing materials look like? Really laying that out so that if anyone in your company or the leader of the work stream leaves tomorrow with no notice, right, the organization should not feel a single thing. And
mm.
right, that's hard because it's taking your ego out of it, right?
No,
We all think we're big contributors, but right, the true contributors, the ones who can say, "Hey, I've left my mark on the organization. I'm good."
that's good. It's easier said than done for sure. But
Percent.
I do find that implementing strategic tactical steps, operational systems are
Yeah,
a lot easier and maybe not easier, but a lot more cut and dry than cultural steps. What can we do from a cultural lens for us to be able to have a succession plan for how the culture is supposed to operate as well?
yeah. A lot of companies talk about, oh, living your values, right? We always pick four big fancy words, and that in the interview process, you probably have the monthly award for for
Yeah.
passion, excellence, or what it is. I'm calling shenanigans, right? Values are not culture. Values are
Yeah,
words.
that's good.
Behaviors are culture. And
That's good.
when things hit the fan, right? That's when people's true colors show, and that's where culture starts to show, right?
Agreed.
It's easy to maintain culture in good times. It's when your organization, your company is struggling, that's when really you have to hold on to culture, and that's naming those behaviors. And one of the exercises I do with all teams that I work with, for profit or nonprofit, is, all right, if your value is excellence, what does excellence look like to your company, right? And actually naming true behaviors, visible behaviors that you can see. Excellent means calling each other out on BS.
There it is.
Right? Like that's something that shows excellence, right? Let's label that. Let's not talk about excellence in our annual review. Let's talk about the 3 times you called a teammate out on not having excellent work, right? That shows me that culture is a living, breathing thing.
I love that. It reminds me of my days in education and a school leader position is because
Yep.
people define words differently. Like your excellence is I'm showing up immediately before class so that I can get my students ready. My excellence may be showing up prepared 15, 20 minutes before class starts and have your warm up slides already up and have the
Yep.
documents already on the student's desk and all these different things. And I love what you said, like naming behaviors and actions that are attached to these arbitrage words that we use as individuals so that for this company, this is how we're defining this. This is what it looks like. And if we're not identifying this or behaving in this way, there's going to be other steps and consequences to hold you accountable and responsible for reaching these type of heights as well. In your leadership journey, like what has helped you really develop a lot of these models and develop these philosophies of leadership as well?
Yeah. So similar to you, I started as a classroom teacher. I taught I taught ninth and 12th grade in the South Bronx. I taught middle
Yep.
school in Harlem, and setting clear expectations, what to do directions, being very clear on what success looks like. Uh,
Explicit instructions.
Right? And it does. And I will say, even if you are not an educator, Doug Lemov's Teach Like a Champion has been like a guiding book for me that I think all leaders should use, whether you're
Great.
in a hospital or whether leading a tech company or leading a nonprofit. Because in order to develop leadership within your team, but also to set clear expectations, there are so many tools and techniques that you can use through that book. But it really has helped my, leadership journey of really defining what success looks like, modeling that success, and then bringing the team along with you. So you're not the only one carrying that culture or carrying those expectations.
I love what you mentioned about modeling that success. And, I it's just something about talking to teachers or former teachers. Because I feel like we just get each other.
We
Um,
do. If you can translate if you can teach in a classroom, you can do anything.
100%, 100%. And I love that word modeling because modeling is something that we often don't talk about a lot in corporate America as well as leadership. And I identify modeling, even just layering it a little bit heavier, is mentorship and
Yep.
being able to have people that you look at or that you can model behavior after. What part or what role does mentorship, executive coaching,
Yep.
accountability structures, what does that play into the long-term sustainability of organizations as a whole?
Yeah, we're really at Gratitude, the organization I lead, we're really big on performance leadership coaching, right? It's a whether whether we're going to coin it as our own or whether it's already out there, but right,
Yeah.
really thinking about leadership coaching, but as leadership coaching within performance, right? Sometimes mentorship and coaching can get a little hearts, puppies, rainbows, and we're
Yeah.
really big on, hey, how do you connect strong leadership to the performance of your company? Because those things go hand in hand. And so when we think about, right, whether I'm coaching my executive team or coaching some of the social entrepreneurs that are in our program, we actually end up doing not just modeling things that go well and really role playing that out, but also doing a lot of postmortems and being
Mhm.
vulnerable, right? As the executive coach in the scenario, me being vulnerable of a time I screwed up, a time I really messed up with my team. And I mean, even at Gratitude, we've got a monthly postmortem where someone comes to the table completely vulnerable and said, hey, this is a time I messed up.
That's
Walk
good.
me through it. And so that they, one, we're creating that culture of failure, right? Of, hey, failure is normal. We're normalizing error and that we can really move forward. But people also know you fail fast, you get back up, and you don't make the mistake again. And I think
100%.
that's just as important when we think about coaching, of allowing that time for reflection, but then also, okay, you still have to perform. So knowing what happened, how do you now move forward and execute and get it done?
That's so good. I was watching a movie the other day. I don't remember what movie it was, and I'm probably going to butcher the exact story. But in the movie, I'm the type of person that when there's a story or some form of like a soliloquy in a movie, I'm like looking it up. But this one time, I didn't look it up, but it was a story that was mentioned in this movie I was watching. Some Greek god or Greek, mythical character got stronger every time he dropped. Like, so every time he hit the ground, he got stronger and then stronger and stronger. And he got his power through defeat.
Yep.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that because I believe that experience, yes, can be our best teacher in most cases. But what can organizations do right now, Lauren, that have experienced defeat? That
Yep.
have experienced loss, that have experienced change, that maybe even are experiencing the lack of funding or funding priorities for their donors are changing. What would be your message for them to have an act like what would be that actionable step that you would give them so that they can begin to get back on track to scaling up their impact?
Yeah. So again, for profit or nonprofit, we're really big on, right, creating that BHAG, that big, hairy, audacious goal,
Mhm.
right, what you're striving towards. The step that, right, then obviously comes from there is all right, well, how do you get there? And a lot of times then people get too nitty gritty. We
Mhm.
like to call creating that three HAG, right? What are the next 3 years? What are
Like,
the three, right? And again, three HAG, right? The 3 year hairy, audacious goals that are going to get you even
yeah.
further. And then each department within there can figure out, okay, how do I play a part in hitting those 3 year right milestones or whatever those goals are for your company. Um, I think also acknowledging what's in your control and what's out of your control is a really important step
Sure.
as a company of here are the things we can control, but here are also the signals, or there's a lot of really great work being done in futures thinking. And again, right, I think IFF is the company that does a lot of futures thinking.
Yeah.
What are the signals you're hearing in the news? Or, right, read it, right? What are you hearing from your stakeholders or from your customers or your clients that allow you to create that BHAG, that 3HAG, right? What are the things that you then as a company can control? And what are the things that you have to say, this is out of my control? So we either have to shift our priorities, we have to revisit what our goals look like. And I think being really conscious of, again, what's in your control and what's out of your control, and then moving forward and acknowledging that. Right? What's that thing people say? You're right, doing the same thing, knowing that you're going to fail over and over is
Yep.
kind of silly. Whatever that saying is, I'm terrible with them. But yes, right? Like, hey, let's not keep doing the same things if we know the economy is not going to help us get there. Let's change course. We got to be able to pivot. And anyone who's lived through COVID knows like the COVID pivot is like the coolest thing ever. Let's do the COVID pivot in 2026 and 2027.
Hey, it's Kyle. Sorry to interrupt your programming, but I got a quick culture check for you. How's your team's energy right now? I mean, literally, right now. Are people feeling inspired? Or are they just showing up? See, here's the truth. Culture doesn't change because we talk about it. It changes because we live it actively every single day. And that's what I help organizations do. Build contagious cultures that people actually want to be a part of. Through keynote talks, interactive trainings, and hands-on consulting, I help leaders transform the way their teams connect, perform, and grow. So if your culture needs a little bit of spark, let's light it up together. Visit theculturelab.org, again, theculturelab.org, or connect with me directly on LinkedIn at Kyle S. King to learn more about how we can work together. Because remember, your culture is contagious. Make it worth catching. Now let's get back to the program. I'm surprised no one's written a book called The COVID Pivot.
Right? I may coin it.
Really
Kyle,
like
don't
that.
steal my idea.
No, you got it. I really like that. And if anybody's listening and you steal the idea, we're definitely coming for royalty money.
You have the Cupid shuffle, and then you have the COVID pivot.
The COVID pivot. I like that. I like that. Let me ask you this, because you talk about the COVID pivot. That I may just even title this whole episode that. I love that.
Let's do it.
There's a lot of organizations that are still relying on grants. There's a lot of organizations that cannot run without grants, without donors, and they have no earned revenue strategy. They're not really building a business. They're a charity, in my opinion. What do you say to those organizations, and how would you help an organization really think through how you approach what you're doing as an actual business rather than just relying on economic factors to support your organization?
Yeah. I mean, the sad reality is 50% of nonprofits fail within the first 2 to 3 years, and only 30% hit their 10th anniversary. So
Wow.
relying on the please, sir, can I have some more? No matter how good your development staff is or how amazing your leader is, right? You're fighting against odds that are right against you. And so I am a huge proponent of, even if you're running a nonprofit, what's your value proposition, right? There are 100,000 of nonprofits all doing college and career readiness, a ton of organizations doing children and youth, ton of, food insecurity organization. You're not very unique, right? Right? Let's be honest. So really laying out what is your value proposition, and then how do you start thinking about whether you're going after individuals, corporate philanthropy, pay to play volunteering, right? There's a lot of different creative ways, how you're partnering with schools, right? Schools have great budgets to really bring in charities to do work with their school, and they're using federal dollars to do it. There's a lot of different revenue streams that charities can play around with, but the passive, oh, we're doing really great work, so the funding will come. You can't be a reactive leader today, right? You have
Exactly.
to be proactive, thinking about your value proposition. And there's a lot of great research out there on how to create a value proposition, how to internalize that value prop within the culture of your organization, to really making sure that everyone knows, hey, this is what we're going after. This is how we're going after it. And this is how we're, unique among the space. Nonprofits don't play well in the sandbox. We all
No.
pretend we do, but we're all going after the same dollars. And so it's really important that everyone in your team can really talk about that unique value prop, because sometimes it's actually not best to hear it from the CEO. They want to hear it from the program staff who have boots on the ground. How does your
Exactly.
program staff, right? How are they trained to talk about, asking for funding and preparing your staff for things like that? I think that's really helpful.
I want to just pause there for a second because I feel like you said something so powerful that many people will miss. You said train your staff and your team on how to communicate your value prop. I was
Yeah.
on the phone with a leader yesterday, and she was on the phone and she was pulling her computer, and I asked her a question prior to that. I was like, what is your value prop? Like, what is your unique selling proposition? Like, why do people come to your programs? Why do parents pay? And she gave, her statement, and then different parents communicated completely different statements.
Yeah.
And I was like, if you asked 50 parents, would the statements mirror that, or would it be 50 probably completely different statements?
Yeah.
And then she came back, and this is probably terrible advice. I don't know. I'm just a very direct person. She was like, we would probably have 50 different statements, but that's the power of our organization. We're just making so much impact. And I was like, no, that is the reason why you're not making much impact, because it's 50 completely different messages,
Yeah.
rather than isolating what you want to be able to create and then having programming and language that everyone is using to be able to talk about why the wow factor of your organization. Can you talk about why it's important for us to have aligned and unified messaging when our teams are going out there and communicating to people on behalf of the organization?
Yeah, right. You are a representative of your org, and whether you're going after funding, whether you are running a program where parents need to listen, whatever the situation is, you want to make sure that you can, again, that the organization or the company is bigger than you, that you could replace one body, put in another, and you would get that same messaging, because that is what culture, right? That's a continuation of culture. We see it at Gratitude Network all the time, right? Gratitude specifically only works with children and youth organizations, right? And we only work with those who are excited and have an impact that they want to scale.
That's
Right.
good.
That is our very narrow, and we are narrow on purpose because we know that's a unique differentiator for us. And so when we convene all of our stakeholders, whether they are in, Nairobi, Kenya, whether they are in the UK, whether they are in Beijing, or whether they're in Oakland, California, everyone is serving youth and everyone is trying to grow their program. And so they will tell you Gratitude is instrumental in helping us do that. And yet in very different parts of the world with very different, with geographic cultures. And so that's something where we've worked really hard to make sure that is a through line for our organization. And that is what we want to be known for, right? Where things get tricky is if you are known for too many things, you're known for nothing,
No,
right?
100%.
And so
100%.
that's something where, right, when brand recognition and how you want to be thought of, that goes back to your big, hairy, audacious goal, right? How do you want to be remembered 25 years from now? And really making sure that that is an aligned activity, right? That everyone in your staff, from your entry level coordinator all the way up to your C-suite, right? Everyone has the same messaging, everyone has the same training, and that happens during the onboarding process for new employees, right? And it's not just for new employees, it's revisited every single year.
That's good. Lauren, why this work? Your passion, your, background, and your leadership has been phenomenal, especially for this work in the social impact industry. Why this work, and why Gratitude Network?
Yeah. Again, I started my career teaching. Our schools are failing our Black and brown kids, and there was so much bureaucracy and red tape that I jumped into the nonprofit sector thinking I could make more of an impact. Realized very quickly I knew a lot about changing children's lives, but I didn't know anything about business. And that's saying something My mom is the dean of a business school. My husband's in private equity. I was made to understand business.
No, definitely.
And yet I knew nothing. And I realized, hey, I had a lot of privilege to have that background, and yet I didn't know anything. And then I thought about all the nonprofit leaders who just come to this work with their heart, and they didn't have that network, they didn't have that support. And so if I think about how scary this world is today, regardless of where you live, and how nonprofits are really working their tails off to meet all of this, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Well, if we could get them running like high performing top businesses, we'd probably make the world a better place a hell of a lot faster. And so I'm so excited, with gratitude. We're doing a lot of work in the children and youth space to create high performing children and youth nonprofits. It starts there and it can only continue. So really passionate about the work, and just grateful to, again, to be here, but also to be really helping nonprofits make, the hard work, go back to a little bit of hard work instead.
What's your 3 to 5 year plan? I talk to a lot of organizational leaders that come on here, and they talk about all of these 3 to 5 year plans of organizations that they work with, and they give examples. But I always love to hear the vision of the person that I'm talking to as well. 3 to 5 years from now, everything works out exactly how you would want to work, to advance your impact in your community. Like, what would you have accomplished?
Yeah. So right now, gratitude only works right with the executive director for these children and youth organizations.
Yeah.
Our vision as we think about the future for gratitude and the future for, my leadership is creating leadership pipelines, right? From youth leaders to emerging leaders, right? To executive directors and CEOs, so that we're truly building a base of leaders, whether that's in children and youth or whether that's across, right, different sectors, to be determined, but really creating leadership pipelines so that we're preparing the next generation to be better leaders than the ones we have today.
Of course. I love it. You're a mom, you're a wife, you're an executive leader. And I believe a lot of times we don't talk about the importance of balance, because we carry a lot in the social impact industry. We're running organizations where dealing with the weight of the people that we support as well, whether it's, in your case, children and different families as well. How do you balance it all? And what would be your advice to the leaders listening in, to being able to still take time for yourself and the people that are most important to you?
Well, so I was a college athlete too. And I will say, and one of the things is I always noticed is I got better grades during season than I did out of season.
I agree.
And so I kind of think about, right? Like I kind of think about being a mom in that same regard of using it as a superpower, right? And it does it, right? That moms get things done so much faster than anyone else in the world. And I truly, right? Like, and I hope everyone is thinking right now of that mom that they know. They're like, how do they do it all? And how do they do it? It's ugly, right below the surface. It's like that duck that's staying real calm, but under the surface, they're pedaling. That's me in a nutshell. But I think it's something, as I've learned, right, in a little, 15 years, and my kids are now, a little bit older, of realizing being a little vulnerable, but also not being embarrassed or not being shy about, I am a mom. I turn my brain off at 4:02 because that's when I leave to pick up my kids. If I need to go back on, I can go back on, but I'm not going on and back on until they're in bed. And it means I might have to work a little faster during the day, but that's what I need to be a good parent. And when I'm a good parent and a good wife, I'm a hell of a lot better of an executive director, right? And realizing that, like, that balance makes me a stronger leader during my day job, because when you have a bad day at work and a bad day at home, right, there's nothing else, right? Really, right? Like, carving out that balance is not just a mental health thing. It's actually going to help you with your leadership performance in your day job. And so making sure that, right, whether if it's a nonprofit, making sure your board knows, hey, here are my lines in the sand. And I think I was a little scared to do that earlier in my career, but feeling a lot more confident. I'm a mom. This is what that means for Lauren Riley. It might look different for someone else. This is what I need to do my job efficiently, right? And is that right? Does that work for your company? And make it clear. And there's a lot of great companies out there who are actually looking the same way we talk about teachers and how the skills are transferable. Use the fact that you're a mom in your interviews, right? I am a stronger leader because I lead 3 children to get through brushing teeth and getting to bed, right?
Yeah,
I have trained my husband to do laundry, right? These are things, if you can do it with your family, you can do it in the workplace. And so use it
100%.
as an asset and not a detriment.
I love that. I love that mindset shift as well. And it makes me think about the leaders listening in that don't recognize that it happens in your mind before it starts showing up within your organizations or in your home. What
100%.
is one mindset shift that a nonprofit leader can make that can really begin to scale up their impact or productivity?
Yeah. There's something that I was sitting down with one of my mentors the other day, and he was talking about how product is king, right? Just this concept of product is king. And I
Yeah.
thought that was so interesting, right? In the tech world, this makes sense, right? You live or
Mhm.
die on your product. As good as your app is or whatever the service is, right? Product is king and everything has to scale down from that.
Yep.
Uh, that is a really great mindset shift for, again, for profit, nonprofit. Your product is king. And then from there, right? Distribution is your kingdom, right? Who you're getting out to, the people you need to bring in, right? And then at the end of the day, financial sustainability is your
Right.
right to rule, right? So if
Mm.
you can get through that, and I think again, really, really great mindset shift, right? Walking through with your leadership team, product is king, distribution is your kingdom, and financial sustainability is the right to rule. And really walk through how your company is thinking about those 3 things. That's going to fundamentally change the way you approach every part of building your company.
Lauren, this conversation has been amazing. This has been it's been electric for sure.
I'm glad.
Where can people find you? How can we continue to support and endorse your work here on our side?
Yeah. So obviously always available right on LinkedIn. Lauren Riley, Gratitude Network. If you're interested in getting more involved in our work, just gratitude-network.org. I also do a lot of executive coaching and workshops for companies and for nonprofits. So even if you're not a children and youth org, some of the learnings that we do are really applicable to any company. So always happy to fly out to wherever and really coach your team and coach you to make your organization more willing to scale. So definitely reach out and always happy to help.
Lauren, thank you so much. Thank you so much for not just sharing your journey, but sharing your wisdom. Your insights are real deal, real deal. And
Reach out.
anybody listening in, how she approaches systems, how she approaches really sustaining organizations before you're given the opportunity to scale organizations is phenomenal. But look, it all starts in your mind. And if you can balance things at home and be the best person at home, it allows you to be able to scale up your impact at work. Look, for listeners, if you want to learn more about Lauren or Gratitude Network, check her out on LinkedIn. Look up the websites, identify how she can be able to best support your organization. And one of the questions that we always ask our listeners is, what type of culture are you spreading? The energy you bring is the culture you create. Go make yours worth catching. We'll see you all next episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Contagious Culture Podcast. If this episode challenged or inspired you, hey, take a second to share it with someone who's building culture in their world. Make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review. It helps more leaders, educators, and change makers just like yourself join the movement. You can connect with me on LinkedIn or YouTube at Kyle S. King for more tips, tools, and methodologies to be able to help you create this ecosystem of absolute excellence. Until next time, lead boldly, live intentionally, and remember, your culture is contagious. Make it worth catching.